It's often argued that the way the ancient world viewed homosexual practice and same-sex relationships is completely different from how we know them today. Therefore, the Bible verses that condemn homosexuality or call homosexual practice a sin are irrelevant to us today. And this has to do with the concept of sexual orientation. The argument goes that the ancient world knew nothing about sexual orientation. The ancient world knew nothing about people having this inward attraction to people of the same sex. So the ancient world only knew homosexual practice as simply just an act that was in many ways harmful and exploitative to those involved.
For example, despite there being dozens of Bible verses saying you must be circumcised, the Apostle Paul boldly declared circumcision means nothing at all because it was getting in the way of love and inclusion. Abolitionists saw this clear pattern and remembered that we don't worship Bible verses, we worship Jesus Christ the Liberator. And so they opposed slavery because of their faith, but despite many of the words of the Bible. Now take a moment and apply that to queer people. There's about 100 verses endorsing slavery in some sense. There are 5 references to something like homosexuality. And I say something like because there are no references to homosexuality as we understand it today, because the ancient world had no knowledge of sexual orientation as we do.
Now, there are several issues with this argument, but I'm only going to deal with 2. So the first issue with this argument is that it's just not historically accurate. So for example, in her book, Love Between Women, Dr. Bernadette Bruton lays this out. She gives several examples of a concept of sexual orientation in the ancient world. And one of the ways she explains this is through astrology. In the ancient world, astrology was a big thing. And it was believed that on the day a child was born, the location of, let's say, the moon and Venus would determine whether or not a child would be born same-sex attracted or attracted to people of the opposite sex. But even before then, in the 4th century BC, in Plato's Symposium, there is a character named Aristophanes who explains the origin of humanity. And Aristophanes explains that people were originally made with double the body parts. And one day Zeus gets mad and divides humanity in half. So from then on, every person is looking for the other half of who they are, which influences their sexual desires for people of the same sex. So the idea that the ancient world had no concept of sexual orientation at all is just not historically accurate. The second reason why this argument is faulty is that it neglects basic Christian fundamentals. More specifically, it neglects what Scripture has revealed to us about God. So Scripture shows us that God is omniscient, meaning all-knowing. And not only that, but this all-knowing God created us. So that means he knows everything about us and everything in our human nature. He knows everything that we would struggle with and every proclivity that we would have. So this all-knowing God who created us and who knows everything about us inspired the biblical writers to write what they did concerning sexuality and homosexual practice. So even if the ancient world had no idea about sexual orientation, and even if the biblical writers had no idea that people could have this inward attraction to people of the same sex, our Creator knew, God knew, and he still inspired the biblical writers to write what they did concerning sexuality and homosexual practice. So, homosexual practice is a sin. There are no contingencies and no exceptions.